I found out my fiancé was cheating on me 10 minutes before our engagement photo shoot. My Omega instincts knew something was wrong the moment I stepped onto his floor. The scent in the air was off. Too sharp. Too intimate. Not mine. I should have turned around. I didn't. The glass wall of his office was half fogged, and through it, I saw him, my alpha, pressed against the window, his hands gripping another Omega like he was afraid to let go. Not confused. Not drunk. Not forced. Desperate. My chest tightened, that familiar Omega ache spreading beneath my ribs. The bond one thought we shared snapping apart like brittle thread. "Please," he whispered, his mouth brushing the other Omega's neck. "Don't stop." The sound hollowed me out. I stayed frozen, watching the man who had promised to protect me give himself away without hesitation. "You're getting married next week," the other Omega murmured, amused. "So?" my fiancé replied. "He's convenient. He always has been. Convenient." The word hit harder than any slap. My fingers curled around the ring box hidden in my coat pocket. Platinum. Engraved. Proof that I had believed in a future he never intended to honor. I turned away before my legs gave out. The elevator ride down felt like freefall. My reflection stared back at me. Pale, trembling, unmistakably Omega in a world that never forgave weakness. By the time I reached the lobby, I wasn't crying. I was empty. The doors slid open to the street, and suddenly my wrist was caught in a firm, steady grip. Leaving without saying goodbye? I looked up. The alpha my fiancé hated most stood before me. His business rival. His enemy. The man who had shattered his deals and humiliated his name in every boardroom battle. His gaze softened when it landed on my face. Then it dropped to my clenched fist. "Did he finally betray you?" he asked quietly. My throat burned. "No," I said, straightening despite the pain. "He showed me exactly who he is." The alpha released my wrist slowly. "Then," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "maybe you shouldn't marry him." I looked at the man in front of me, Jin-Ho Choi. He was everything my fiancé wasn't. Composed, observant, and seemingly carved from granite. To the world, he was a predator in a tailored suit. But in the shadow of the lobby's marble pillars, his scent, dark cedar and rain, felt like a shield. "And who should I marry instead?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The bitterness surprised even me. "My family expects a merger. The contracts are signed." Jin-Ho stepped closer, invading my space just enough to drown out the lingering, sickly sweet scent from upstairs. He didn't look at the building behind us. He looked only at me. "Contracts can be bought," he said, his voice dropping to a register that made my Omega instincts hum with a strange, new curiosity. "And reputations can be traded. If you go through with that wedding, you'll just be a pawn in his game. But if you walk away with me..." He paused, his eyes searching mine for any sign of hesitation. "If you walk away with me, you're the one who ends the game." I looked down at my hand, still clutching the ring box. The platinum felt heavy, like a shackle I hadn't realized I was wearing until this moment. Upstairs, the man I loved was discarding me. Down here, his greatest enemy was offering me a weapon. "You'd marry me just to spite him?" I challenged, trying to steady myself. Jin-Ho's lips tilted into a ghost of a smile. Not the cruel one from the financial magazines, but something sharper, something protective. "I'd do it because he doesn't deserve you," Jin-Ho replied, extending his hand. "And because I always take what he's too stupid to keep." Rain began to blur the world around us, but my vision had never been clearer. I didn't look back at the elevator. I didn't think about the photo shoot, the flowers, or the lies. I reached out and placed my hand in Jin-Ho's. "Take me away from here," I said. The leather interior of Jin-Ho's car smelled of expensive tobacco and silence. It was a suffocating contrast to the chaos screaming inside my head. I stared out the window, watching the rain smudge the city lights into neon streaks, my hand still tingling where he had held it. "You're shaking," Jin-Ho remarked. He didn't reach for me this time. He simply sat there, radiating a calm alpha dominance that demanded I find my own center. "I just watched my life collapse in 10 minutes," I replied, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. I think I'm allowed a little tremor. Your life didn't collapse, he corrected coolly. The cage just opened. There is a difference. He pulled a sleek tablet from the seat pocket and tapped a few icons. A moment later, a digital file appeared. A draft of the merger agreement my fiancé had been so eager to sign. This contract treats you like a line item on a balance sheet, Jin-Ho said, sliding the device toward me. By next month, he would have used your family's assets to cover his gambling debts. He didn't want a husband, he wanted a bailout. I stared at the numbers. The betrayal deepened. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the calculated destruction of my name. My fiancé hadn't just been unfaithful. He had been a predator. Why help me? I asked, meeting Jin-Ho's gaze. You're a businessman. You don't rescue omegas out of the goodness of your heart. Jin-Ho leaned back, his sharp features illuminated by passing streetlights. I want the company he's trying to steal from you, he said calmly. And I want to see the look on his face when he realizes he lost it to the omega he called convenient. He paused, his gaze darkening with something that felt less like strategy and more like a challenge. But mostly, he continued, I want to prove that I can take better care of what is mine than he ever could. I'm not yours, I snapped, my pride finally flickering back to life. Not yet, he conceded, a faint, dangerous smirk touching his lips. But we have an engagement party to attend in 3 hours. He expects you to show up, smile for the cameras, and play the role of the doting omega. I remembered the ring box still tucked in my pocket. I pulled it out, the platinum band gleaming mockingly under the dim light. I'm not going back there, I said firmly. Oh, you are, Jin-Ho replied, his voice dropping into a low, commanding rumble. But you won't go as his fiancé. You'll go as my guest of honor. We're going to give them a photo shoot they'll never forget. He picked up a sleek black phone and made a single call. Cancel my evening meetings. Bring the stylist to the penthouse. We have a wedding to disrupt. As the car turned away from my old life and toward Jin-Ho's skyscraper, the convenient omega ceased to exist. I didn't know who was taking his place yet, but with the rival alpha at my side, I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't be the one crying by midnight. The penthouse was a cathedral of glass and steel, overlooking a city that looked small from this height. While Jin-Ho stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, speaking into his phone in hushed, urgent tones, a team of stylists swarmed around me like silent ghosts. They stripped away the soft, pastel-colored suit my fiancé had chosen for me, the one meant to make me look approachable, submissive. In its place, Jin-Ho's lead stylist draped me in deep charcoal silk and a structured blazer that felt less like clothing and more like armor. The alpha requested this, the stylist whispered as she fastened a choker of black pearls around my neck. It was a bold choice for an omega, not a collar of ownership, but a declaration of status. I caught my reflection. I didn't look like the broken person who had been shaking in a lobby an hour ago. I looked expensive. I looked untouchable. I looked dangerous. Better. A voice rumbled from the doorway. Jin-Ho had finished his calls. With a single nod, he dismissed the staff and walked toward me. The scent of cedar and rain intensified with every step, wrapping around me until the phantom trace of my fiancé's betrayal was completely scrubbed away. He stopped just inches from me, his gaze tracking the line of black pearls against my skin. Are you ready? He asked. Once we walk through those doors, there's no going back. Your family will be furious. The press will be relentless. Let them be, I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. I spent 3 years trying to be what they wanted. It only got me called convenient. Jin-Ho reached out, his thumb brushing along my jawline. The heat of his touch sent a sharp jolt through me, a reminder that I was trading one alpha for another, even if this one felt like a storm compared to a puddle. Good, he murmured. I don't do business with people who hesitate. He reached into his inner vest pocket and pulled out a ring. It wasn't the platinum band I had bought. This one was heavy, a signet ring set with a rare black diamond. It looked less like jewelry and more like a claim, like something worn by kings. Wear this, he commanded. On your left hand. Jin-Ho, this is too much, I breathed, staring at the dark stone. People will think. I want them to think exactly what they see. He cut in. That you were never his to begin with. That you were simply waiting for someone powerful enough to stand beside you. I slid the ring onto my finger. It was cold, heavy, and it felt like a promise of war. My fiancé, I whispered, the reality finally sinking in. He'll be there, waiting for me to walk in and apologize for being late. Jin-Ho offered me his arm, his expression settling into the ruthless mask the business world feared. Let him wait, he said coolly. It'll be the last thing he ever gets from you. The ballroom of the Grand Lexus Hotel was a sea of champagne flutes and artificial laughter. It was exactly the kind of event my fiancé loved. A place where he could perform the role of the perfect alpha heir while I hovered 3 steps behind him, playing the silent accessory. The heavy oak doors were closed, but I could hear the muffled sound of a microphone. Min-Jae Park was speaking. I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight. His voice boomed, dripping with a confidence that made my stomach turn. My Omega is running a bit late. Likely nerves for the big day, but we are honored to celebrate this union of our 2 families. Are you ready to stop being a background character? Jin-Ho whispered in my ear. His breath was warm, grounding me against the sudden spike of adrenaline. I didn't answer with words. I simply tightened my grip on his arm and nodded. Jin-Ho didn't knock. He signaled his security detail, and they threw the doors open with a thunderous crack that silenced the room instantly. The music died. 100 heads turned. We walked in together, our footsteps echoing on the polished marble. The light caught the black pearls at my throat and the dark shimmer of my new suit. Beside me, Jin-Ho looked like a conqueror returning home, his presence so massive it seemed to suck the air out of the room. I saw Min-Jae standing on the stage, his hand frozen mid-air as he held a glass of vintage wine. The other Omega, the one from the office, stood just a few feet away in the front row, a smug smile quickly curdling into confusion. You're late, Min-Jae stammered into the microphone, his face flushing a deep, angry red. And what is he doing here? Jin-Ho led me straight to the foot of the stage, ignoring the gasps and the frantic clicking of paparazzi cameras. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked directly at the man who had called me convenient. He isn't late, Jin-Ho said, his voice amplified by the sudden, dead silence of the hall. He's exactly on time to announce a change in plans. Get away from him, Jin-Ho, Min-Jae hissed, stepping off the stage, his alpha pheromones flaring in a desperate attempt to intimidate. This is my engagement party. He is my Omega. I stepped forward then, moving out of Jin-Ho's shadow. I looked Min-Jae in the eye, the man I had spent years trying to please, and felt absolutely nothing. I think you're mistaken, I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. The engagement is off. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the platinum ring box I'd been carrying, and let it drop. It didn't hit the floor with a thud. It clattered, spinning across the marble until it stopped at Min-Jae's feet. You said I was convenient, I reminded him, watching the blood drain from his face. So I decided to find someone who found me essential. Jin-Ho stepped up behind me, placing a possessive hand on the small of my back. The black diamond on my finger caught the chandelier light, blindingly bright. The merger with your family is dead, Jin-Ho announced to the room, his eyes cold as ice. But I'm happy to announce a new partnership, one that actually has value. The scandal was instantaneous. The whispers turned into a roar. Min-Jae took a step toward me, his hand raised in blind rage, but he didn't get far. Jin-Ho moved faster than I could blink, stepping between us and catching Min-Jae's wrist in a grip that looked like it could snap bone. Don't, Jin-Ho warned, his voice a low, lethal growl that made every Omega in the room shiver. He doesn't belong to you anymore. If you even breathe in his direction, I'll burn your father's company to the ground before sunrise. The silence that followed Jin-Ho's threat was heavy, broken only by the frantic mechanical whirring of cameras. Min-Jae Park's face was a mask of humiliated fury, his wrist still trapped in Jin-Ho's iron grip. You think you can just walk in here and take him? Min-Jae spat, his voice trembling as he tried to reclaim some shred of dignity. He's an Omega from a high-standing family. You're a shark, Jin-Ho. My father will have your head for this. Jin-Ho finally released him, but the way he wiped his palm on a silk handkerchief made it clear he considered Min-Jae nothing more than filth. Your father is currently busy answering a call from my board of directors, Jin-Ho said smoothly. By tomorrow morning, your high-standing family will be looking for a new benefactor. I suggest you start practicing your apologies. I felt a tug on my sleeve. It was the other Omega, the one from the office. He had crept closer, his eyes darting between me and Jin-Ho. You're making a mistake, the other Omega whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. He looked at me with a sneer, his eyes flicking to Jin-Ho. Min-Jae loves me. You were just the placeholder, Yoon-jae. Do you really think a man like Jin-Ho Choi wants someone who was just thrown away? I turned to him, letting the insult roll off me. Earlier today, that comment would have destroyed me. Now, looking at him in his flashy, cheap jewelry, I only felt pity. He didn't throw me away, I said, my voice cool and echoing through the ballroom. I walked out. There's a difference between being a placeholder and being the one who holds the power. I hope he's worth the debt you're about to inherit. Jin-Ho didn't let the conversation continue. He wrapped a protective arm around my shoulders, steering me toward the exit. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, people whispering behind their hands, phones raised to capture the moment the convenient Omega left with the king of the corporate underworld. We reached the lobby where the black sedan was idling, its engine a low, predatory hum. Only when the heavy door closed, muffling the sounds of the shouting reporters, did I finally let out the breath I'd been holding since I saw the fogged glass of the office. The way you handled that, Jin-Ho said, sliding into the car across from me, his dark gaze unreadable, was impressive. I ruined my family's reputation, I whispered, staring at the black diamond on my hand. My parents, they won't forgive this. Your parents were selling you to a man who didn't respect you, Jin-Ho replied. He leaned forward, letting his scent, dark cedar and rain, flood the space between us, grounding me. I don't ask for forgiveness. I ask for results. Tonight we sent a message. Tomorrow we start the real work. I looked up at him, the truth finally hitting me. I wasn't just a jilted lover anymore. I was a partner to a man who played with lives like chess pieces. What is the real work, Jin-Ho? He reached out, not to touch my face this time, but to tilt my chin up so I had to meet his gaze. Making sure you never feel convenient ever again. The car ride was silent until we were miles away from the hotel. Neon lights blurred against the glass, streaking the city into something unreal. I need a name, Jin-Ho said suddenly, breaking the quiet. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed on the tablet in his lap, though he wasn't typing. A name? I asked, confused. For the press release, he clarified, finally turning his head. And for me, if we are going to do this, I won't have you referred to as Min-Jae's ex, or the Park family's Omega. From this moment on, you need your own identity. One that belongs to no one but yourself. He reached out, his hand hovering near mine. So tell me, he said quietly, who am I protecting tonight? I didn't answer immediately. I stared at the black diamond ring on my finger. It felt like a weight, a tether to a man I barely knew, yet who had just declared war for my sake. Seo Yoon-jae. The way Jin-Ho said my full name made it sound like a formal decree. I looked up to find him watching me, his gaze intense enough to steal my breath. That's my name, I whispered. It's a name that is currently trending on every social media platform in the country, Jin-Ho said, sliding his phone onto the leather seat between us. The headlines were already screaming. Siren Group Air Jilted? And Jin-Ho Choi's Mystery Omega. My parents, they're going to disown me, I said softly, the reality of the social suicide I just committed finally sinking in. I ruined the merger. I humiliated the Park family. You didn't ruin anything, Yoon-jae, Jin-Ho replied. The sudden drop of my family name made my heart skip. His voice softened just a fraction as he leaned closer. You simply chose a better partner. Your parents are business people. Once they realize that I am a far more powerful ally than the Parks, they'll come crawling back. He brushed his fingers lightly against the back of my hand. But tonight, we aren't going to your parents' house. And we aren't going to a hotel where the press can find you. The car began climbing a private road leading to the city's most exclusive residential peak. You're staying with me, he stated. It wasn't a question. It sounded like a sanctuary. Jin-Ho, I began, my voice trembling slightly. Why are you doing this? You said you wanted the company. But this feels like more than a business deal. The gates swung shut behind us as the car pulled into a hidden driveway. Jin-Ho turned to me, his dark eyes reflecting moonlight. Min-Jae called you convenient, he said. He was wrong. You're a catalyst, Yoon-jae. And I've wanted an excuse to take everything he owns for a long time. You just gave me the best reason of all. Jin-Ho's private residence was a sanctuary of minimalist luxury. Dark wood, soft lighting, and a silence so deep it felt heavy. He led me to a sprawling suite overlooking the sleeping city. The staff has brought up a few things for you, he said, his voice echoing faintly. Bathe, rest. My room is at the end of the hall if you need anything. He turned to leave, but I remained frozen in the center of the room. The structured blazer felt like it was shrinking, the black pearls around my throat suddenly suffocating. I reached up, fumbling with the clasp, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The adrenaline was gone. I was just cold. I can't, I whispered. Jin-Ho stopped. He turned back, his gaze lingering on my trembling hands. Without a word, he crossed the room. His presence, solid, warm, overwhelming, finally stilled my shivering. Turn around, he commanded softly. I obeyed. His fingers brushed the sensitive skin of my nape as he unhooked the pearl choker. A spark shot down my spine. Fear tangled with safety. One by one, he eased the heavy blazer from my shoulders and placed it on a chair. As the weight left my body, so did my composure. My phone lit up on the vanity. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It was a message from my father. Traitor, don't bother coming home. Then another from Min-Jae. Do you think you're special? He'll dump you in a week. Or, you were always looking for a bigger check. The words blurred through tears I'd been holding back since the moment the cameras flashed. I grabbed the phone, trying to silence it, but more messages kept coming. Venom from the man I'd spent 3 years trying to love. He's right, I choked, a sob finally breaking free. I've lost everything. My family, my home. I'm just a scandal now. Jin-Ho moved immediately. He took the phone from my hand and set it face down on the table with a sharp thud. Then he did something unexpected. He placed his hands on my shoulders and turned me to face him, forcing my attention away from the digital ghost of Min-Jae. Look at me, Yoon-jae, he growled, his alpha scent flaring. Not to dominate, but to smother my distress. You didn't lose a home. You left a burning building. Would you rather be respectable and miserable in his bed, or a scandal who is finally free? My vision swam as I looked up at him. It still hurts. It hurts that he could say those things. Jin-Ho's expression softened into something fiercely protective. He brushed a stray tear from my cheek with his thumb. Let it hurt tonight, he murmured. Tomorrow, I'll make sure he regrets every word. You aren't a placeholder. And you aren't alone. He didn't step away. For a long moment, we stood there in the quiet, the space between us closing until I could feel the steady beat of his heart. The sun rose in a pale, hazy gold over the city, but the light felt different here. It didn't feel like a countdown to another day of being perfect for Min-Jae. I had fallen into a deep, exhausted sleep, the kind that only comes after your world has ended and begun again in the same breath. When I sat up, the silk sheets shifted against my skin, a reminder that I was in Jin-Ho's house, in Jin-Ho's life. The house was deathly quiet. I padded toward the door, my heart hammering. Now that the darkness of night was gone, the reality of my situation felt heavier. Was Jin-Ho already at the office? Was he regretting the impulsive rescue of a broken Omega? I pulled the door open slowly, expecting an empty hallway. Instead, I found him. Jin-Ho was sitting in a high-backed velvet chair positioned directly across from my door. He was still wearing his dress shirt from the night before, the sleeves rolled up and the top buttons undone. A tablet rested on his lap, but his eyes were closed, his head tilted back against the wall. He hadn't gone to his master suite. He had stayed right here, like a silent guardian between me and the rest of the world. The floor creaked softly beneath my weight. His eyes snapped open instantly, sharp, alert, and locked onto me with a focus that stole my breath. Yoon-jae, he said, his voice rough with sleep. He stood, and even disheveled. His presence filled the corridor. Did you sleep? Yes, I stammered, gripping the doorframe. Jin-Ho, did you stay here all night? Why? He stepped closer, the familiar scent of cedar now mixed with the faint warmth of morning coffee. His gaze swept my face, searching for any lingering traces of last night's tears. The security system is the best in the country, he said calmly. But I know how Min-Jae thinks. He's a coward who lashes out when he's cornered. I wanted to make sure that if he tried anything, through the phone or in person, I'd be the first thing he had to go through. My chest tightened, but not with the sharp, aching fear I'd known before. This was different, warm, steady, blooming. You didn't have to do that, I whispered. I do what I want, Yoon-jae, he replied, though there was a rare softness beneath the words. He hesitated for a brief moment before brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. And right now, I want you to feel like this house is the one place where no one can touch you unless you want them to. He gestured toward the grand staircase. Breakfast is ready. After we eat, we have a meeting. Your father has been calling my office every 10 minutes since 5 a.m. A chill ran through me at the mention of my father, but Jin-Ho caught my hand, his grip firm and grounding. Don't look like that, he said gently. This time you aren't going in as a bargaining chip. You're going in as my partner. His thumb tightened around my fingers. Let's show them exactly what happens when they lose someone like you. Breakfast was a quiet affair, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was focused. Jin-Ho watched me over the rim of his coffee cup, his sharp eyes noting the way I sat a little straighter with every bite. I was fueling up for a war I had been losing for years, but today, I had the best general in the world on my side. Finish your tea, he said softly. Then we'll get you ready. We spent the next hour preparing. This time, there were no stylists, just me and him. He helped me select a watch from his own collection, a heavy silver piece that felt like an anchor on my wrist. When I checked my reflection, I realized the Seo Yoon-jae staring back wasn't the trembling Omega from the elevator. This version looked like he could dismantle a man with a single look. The drive to Jin-Ho's corporate headquarters was short. The boardroom at Choi Holdings was freezing, the air sharpened by the tension of the three men waiting for us. My father sat at the long mahogany table, looking 10 years older than he had yesterday, flanked by his legal team. And then there was Min-Jae. He looked pathetic. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and the moment I walked in, he stood so fast his chair screeched against the floor. Yoon-jae, he started, his voice cracking. Thank God. This has all been a huge misunderstanding. I was stressed. Jin-Ho didn't even look at him. He pulled out the heavy leather chair at the head of the table, the chairman's seat, and waited for me to sit. I didn't give you permission to speak to him, Min-Jae, Jin-Ho said, his voice falling like a guillotine. I sat. For the first time in my life, I wasn't in the Omega's chair off to the side. I was at the center. I looked at my father, who stared back with a mixture of shame and calculated desperation. Yoon-jae, my father began, his voice gravelly. You've had your little tantrum. You've made your point. Now sign the apology statement we've drafted. If we move quickly, we can still save the merger with the Parks. We can move the wedding up to this weekend. I looked at the document pushed toward me. A lie. A public confession stating I had suffered a nervous breakdown, and that Jin-Ho had taken advantage of my confusion. I felt Jin-Ho's hand rest on the back of my chair. He said nothing. He didn't need to. I picked up the document. Then, slowly and deliberately, I ripped it down the middle. There won't be a wedding, I said, my voice calm and cold. And there won't be a merger. You don't have a choice, Min-Jae shouted, slamming his hands on the table. Your family's company is underwater. Without my father's investment, you're nothing. You'll be a nameless omega on the street. I turned to Jin-Ho. He didn't speak. He simply slid a sleek blue folder in front of me. Actually, Min-Jae, I said, opening it to reveal a stack of freshly notarized acquisition papers. As of 8 o'clock this morning, Choi Holdings purchased 49% of my father's debt. I turned the page. And the remaining 51%? Jin-Ho gifted it to me. My signature stared back at them from the bottom of the deed. I don't need your investment, I continued, because as of 5 minutes ago, I am the majority shareholder of my father's company. I looked directly at my father, which means I am officially terminating the Park family as our business partners. Effective immediately. The silence was absolute. Min-Jae looked like he might collapse. My father looked like he was seeing me for the first time in 24 years. You can't do this, my father whispered. I can, I replied, standing. Because while you were busy selling me to a man who didn't want me, I found someone who understood my value. You wanted a merger. I met Min-Jae's eyes. You got one, just not one you could control. Jin-Ho stepped forward then, his gaze locking onto Min-Jae. Security is waiting downstairs, he said coolly. Escort Mr. Park out. If I ever see your name on a caller ID or legal document involving Seo Yoon-jae again, his smile was slow, deadly. I'll erase you. The sound of the heavy boardroom doors clicking shut behind Min-Jae and his legal team was the most satisfying noise I had ever heard. My father remained in his seat, his hands flat on the table, staring at the torn pieces of the apology statement as if they were the ruins of his own kingdom. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. He was a guest in this building, a building that belonged to the man he had once called a shark. The car is waiting downstairs, Jin-Ho said. The lethal edge he'd used on Min-Jae was gone, replaced by that low, steady hum that grounded me. We're finished here. I nodded, but when I tried to stand, my knees wavered. The full weight of what I had just done, ending my engagement, dismantling a merger, and taking control of my father's legacy inside Choi Holdings, crashed over me all at once. Jin-Ho was at my side instantly. He didn't merely offer his arm. He tucked my hand into the crook of his elbow, his warmth bleeding through the silk of my sleeve. Breathe, he murmured, meant only for me. The war is over. You won. We left the boardroom together, passing rows of Jin-Ho's elite staff who watched us with open curiosity. An hour ago, I'd walked in as a disgraced omega looking for protection. Now I walked out as a majority shareholder. Inside the private elevator, I leaned my head back against the mirrored wall, my reflection unfamiliar but steady. You really gave me 51%, I whispered, staring at the blue folder in my lap. You could have owned it all. You could have been my father's boss. Jin-Ho reached for my hand, gently loosening my grip on the folder. He didn't take it. He just held my fingers, his thumb brushing over the black diamond ring. I have enough companies, Yoon-jae, he said quietly, meeting my gaze as the elevator lights slid past us. I didn't do this to expand my portfolio. I did it because I wanted you armed. I wanted them to realize they can't buy you anymore. He paused, something thoughtful, almost vulnerable, passing through his eyes. And, he added, it's far more interesting to stand beside a CEO than to own a broken omega. The elevator chimed, the doors opening to the lobby. Beyond the glass walls, cameras and reporters waited like vultures. The scandal was just beginning. What happens now? I asked as we headed for the car. The press will want a wedding date. My family will want those shares back. And Min-Jae. Min-Jae is already dead. Jin-Ho cut in calmly. He just doesn't know it yet. He stopped before the exit, turning me to face him. As for the wedding, he said, his voice dropping, deliberate and sincere, that choice is yours. This partnership can be real, or it can be convenient. He searched my face, not commanding. Waiting. The question lingered between us as we stepped into the car, heavy and unresolved. I didn't answer him. Not because I didn't know, but because I wasn't ready to admit how deeply the decision had already rooted itself in my chest. The ride back to Jin-Ho's place felt different. The silence wasn't weighed down by dread like it had been that morning. It was charged, humming with something new and dangerous. My gaze kept drifting between the blue folder in my lap and the man seated beside me. The city lights streaked past the tinted windows, but I barely noticed them. "You're staying with me?" Jin-Ho said as the car descended into the underground garage. It wasn't a demand. It was a statement grounded in fact. "Min-Jae knows your old apartment address. Your parents still have keys to the villa. This is the only place they can't reach you. And when the press asks why I'm living with my fiancé's rival less than 24 hours after the breakup, I asked quietly as we stepped into the private elevator. Jin-Ho waited until the doors slid shut before turning to me. The space suddenly felt smaller, the air thick with the scent of cedar and heat. "We tell them the truth," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "That you realized you were settling for copper when you could have had gold. That we've been discussing this merger for months." "A lie," I whispered. "A strategic truth," he corrected calmly. He stepped closer, bracing his hand against the wall beside my head. "But if we're going to sell it, we have to be convincing. That means sharing a home, peering together. That means—" His gaze flicked to my lips for the briefest moment. "People need to believe I'm obsessed with you, Yoon-jae." My heart slammed hard against my ribs. "And are you?" I asked quietly. "A good actor, I mean." Jin-Ho leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. "I've never liked acting," he murmured. "I prefer getting exactly what I want." The elevator doors opened. He stepped out without looking back, leaving me staring at my own reflection. Flushed, steady, very much awake. Inside the penthouse, a single document lay on the kitchen island. It wasn't a corporate merger. It was a cohabitation agreement. "Read it," Jin-Ho said, moving toward the bar and pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. "If there's anything you don't like, separate wings, security boundaries, a no-touching clause, add it. I told you, I'm not Min-Jae. You hold the pen." I picked it up. My hand didn't tremble this time. Every clause protected me. My assets, my privacy, my autonomy. There were exits written into every page. "There's one thing missing," I said as he handed me a glass. His brow lifted slightly. "What's that? What do you get out of this?" I asked, meeting his eyes. "You gave me my company. You're giving me a home. Protection. What's the price, Jin-Ho?" He took a slow sip, his gaze never leaving mine. "The price is simple," he said evenly. "I want to be the only person you trust. Not because of ink on paper, but because I'm the only one who earned it." The next morning didn't begin in a boardroom. It began with a knock on my bedroom door. When I opened it, Jin-Ho stood there with 2 large, empty trunks and a look of cold, unmistakable resolve. "What are these for?" I asked, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "To get rid of the ghosts," he replied. "We're going to your old apartment. You have 30 minutes to pack anything that matters. Everything else, anything Min-Jae bought, anything tied to being convenient, stays behind." Something in my chest loosened. I didn't argue. I just nodded. The drive to my old place felt unreal, like moving through the ruins of a past life. By the time we arrived, the lobby was already swarming with reporters. Cameras flashed. Voices called my name. Jin-Ho didn't slow down. He stepped out first, pulled me firmly to his side, and walked forward like the crowd didn't exist. The noise faded the moment we passed through the doors. Inside the apartment, the air was stale, lifeless. It was a space shaped by Min-Jae's tastes. Beige, expensive, and safe in the most suffocating way. "I hated this sofa," I whispered, staring at the pristine furniture. "Then it stays," Jin-Ho said simply. I moved from room to room, startled by how little of myself I found. I packed my grandmother's watch, my college degree, a few dog-eared books that had survived every move. That was it. In the closet, rows of pastel suits stared back at me. The ones Min-Jae had insisted I wear to look softer. "Do you want these?" Jin-Ho asked from the doorway. "No," the answer came fast, sharp with relief. "They made me feel like I was disappearing." "Good." He pulled out his phone. "Donate everything." As we headed for the door, my eyes caught on a framed photo. Min-Jae and me, smiling for the camera. I was staring straight ahead. He was checking his watch. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Wait, I said suddenly. I turned, grabbed a heavy crystal vase, an anniversary gift from Min-Jae, and let it slip from my hands. It shattered across the hardwood floor, splintering into 1,000 jagged pieces. Jin-Ho laughed, a low, rich sound that made something reckless bloom in my chest. Very therapeutic, Seo Yoon-jae. We exited through the front doors. I didn't hide my face this time. I wore Jin-Ho's silver watch, his black diamond ring, and when the reporters shouted about the broken engagement, I didn't flinch. Mr. Seo, someone called. Are you really leaving Min-Jae Park for his rival? Jin-Ho stopped. He turned to the cameras and drew me into the crook of his arm, his hold unmistakably protective. He isn't leaving anyone, Jin-Ho said, his voice cutting clean through the chaos. He's simply moving into the future he deserves. Any further questions can be directed to my legal team. He guided me into the car. Before we pulled away, Jin-Ho reached for my hand, threading our fingers together. The purge is done, he murmured. Now we show them the upgrade. While the world was busy talking about our new romance, Min-Jae was rotting in his own desperation. 2 days later, as Jin-Ho and I prepared for a high-profile charity gala, our first official appearance as a couple, my phone chimed. An unknown number. I frowned, then opened the message. There was an attached photo, blurry, taken from a distance. It showed me sitting in a small cafe 3 years ago, laughing at something on my phone. And behind me, half-hidden, unmistakable, Jin-Ho, watching. The message beneath the photo read, "You think he's your savior, Yoon-jae? He's been stalking you for years. He planned the breakup. He set me up. Ask him about the red file in his safe. He didn't save you. He stole you." My breath hitched. I stared at the image. It was from a day I barely remembered, but now I couldn't unsee it. Jin-Ho's presence in the background, his attention fixed on me. Is everything all right? Jin-Ho walked into the dressing room, adjusting his cufflinks, calm and composed. Every inch the powerful alpha the world feared. I looked from my phone to him. Doubt crept in like a cold mist. Was this all a game? Had the convenient line in the office been scripted? Was I just a prize he'd spent years positioning himself to claim? Jin-Ho, I said quietly, my voice trembling despite myself. What is the red file? The air changed. His hands froze mid-motion. He didn't look away, but the mask cracked, just enough for me to see it. The silence in the room became suffocating. Jin-Ho didn't deny it, didn't explain. He just stood there, the sharp lines of his tuxedo making him look like a beautiful predatory statue. Who sent you that? He asked at last, his voice dropping into something dangerous and low. Does it matter? I countered, holding the phone up so he could see the photo. Is it true? Have you been watching me? Did you set up the scene at the office? Did you make sure I walked in on Min-Jae? I wanted him to laugh. I wanted him to tell me it was a lie from a desperate ex. Instead, Jin-Ho turned away. He walked to the biometric safe built into the wall and pressed his thumb to the scanner. Click. He pulled out a slender red folder and tossed it onto the vanity in front of me. Open it, he commanded. My hands shook as I did. Inside weren't just photos. There were bank statements, private investigator reports, medical records, my medical records, from the time I had tripped and bruised my ribs 2 years ago. Min-Jae didn't just cheat on you, Yoon-jae, Jin-Ho said, stepping closer. His alpha scent flaring with dark, protective rage. He was draining your personal accounts. He was gaslighting you into thinking you were fragile, so you wouldn't attend board meetings. My stomach dropped. And that fall, Jin-Ho continued. My investigator found the footage. He pushed you. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. I remembered that day. I had truly believed I slipped. I didn't set up the cheating, Jin-Ho said, his eyes burning into mine. Min-Jae is trash. He did that all on his own. But I did make sure the office door wasn't locked. I made sure your car was delayed so you'd arrive when the elevator was empty. He didn't look away. I didn't steal you, Yoon-jae. I gave you the only thing I couldn't give you myself. He leaned closer, The truth. You watched me suffer for years, I whispered, the weight of the file heavy in my lap. I spent years building a cage for him, Jin-Ho admitted, his voice raw, his hand rising to cup my cheek with possessive intensity. So that when you finally ran, you'd have nowhere to go but to me. His thumb brushed my skin. Call it stalking, call it obsession. But I would have burned this entire city down to get you away from him. I looked into his eyes and saw it. Not guilt, devotion. He wasn't a savior in white. He was a wolf who had waited patiently for the fox to realize the hunter was the real enemy. I should have been afraid. But as I stared at the evidence of every silent protection, every unseen intervention, all I felt was heat, strange, fierce, and rising. You're insane, I breathed. Only for you, he replied. He leaned down, his lips brushing mine in a ghost of a kiss that promised everything. Now, he murmured. Are we going to that gala to finish him? Or are you going to stay here and punish me? We didn't stay. We went to the gala. If the boardroom had been a skirmish, this was the execution. Min-Jae was there, hollow-eyed, desperate, clinging to investors who refused to meet his gaze. When he saw us enter, me in a suit worth more than his car, wrapped in Jin-Ho's scent, he snapped. He's a monster, Yoon-jae. Min-Jae screamed, stumbling forward. He planned everything. He's been stalking you. The music stopped. The elite of Seoul turned as Min-Jae destroyed himself in public. Jin-Ho didn't flinch. He only tightened his arm around my waist. Min-Jae, I said, my voice clear and cold, echoing through the ballroom. The difference between you and Jin-Ho is simple. I met his eyes without fear. You used me to hide your weaknesses. He used his strength to show me mine. I turned to security. Get him out of my sight. And tell the press. The Seo Choi merger is no longer a business arrangement. Then I turned to Jin-Ho. Cameras flashed. Whispers exploded. My past lay in ruins behind me. It's real, I said. And this time, the whole world heard it. 5 months later, the Park family was gone. Bankrupt, disgraced, exiled from the very social circles they once ruled with cruelty and arrogance. Their name had become a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. My father was retired. He lived comfortably now on a generous pension I provided, but with zero authority over my life, my decisions, or my company. For the first time, my future belonged entirely to me. I stood at the railing of the private balcony, gazing out at the city I now helped lead. The skyline shimmered under the evening light, no longer something I looked up to, but something I stood level with. Strong arms wrapped around my waist from behind. The familiar, grounding scent of cedar filled my lungs. You're thinking again, Jin-Ho murmured, resting his chin on my shoulder. Just thinking about how convenient my life turned out to be. I teased, leaning back into his chest. A quiet chuckle vibrated against my spine. Jin-Ho turned me in his arms, his gaze searching my face. Not calculating, not guarded, just sure. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a black diamond meant for contracts or control. It was a simple, elegant band of gold. No more contracts, Yoon-jae, he said softly. No more revenge. No more red files. His thumb brushed over my knuckles as his voice dropped. Just us. He met my eyes, no alpha dominance, no power play. Only certainty. Will you marry me? He asked. For real this time. I didn't hesitate. I didn't weigh pros and cons. I didn't consult advisors, lawyers, or boards of directors. I smiled. Yes. As he slid the ring onto my finger, something quiet and final settled into place. The last trace of the convenient omega disappeared. I wasn't a placeholder. I wasn't a bargaining chip. I wasn't a strategy. I was Seo Yoon-jae, and I had finally found the alpha who understood that essential was the only thing I would ever be. 1 year later, the headquarters of the newly rebranded Seo Choi International was a hive of activity, but the top floor remained a fortress of silence. I sat behind my desk, the same mahogany desk that once belonged to my father, reviewing the final report on our European expansion. The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls, sharp and alive, just like the empire I now helped rule. My phone buzzed. A message from Jin-Ho appeared on the screen. Min-Jae Park's final appeal has been officially denied. He begins his prison sentence for corporate embezzlement today. Thought you'd like to know. I smiled softly and set the phone down. The past was finally irrevocably buried. Just as I reached for my pen to sign the last document, the heavy double doors of my office swung open. No one in the building dared to enter without knocking. Except one person. Jin-Ho walked in, devastating as ever in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. He didn't speak until he reached my desk. Then he leaned forward, planting his hands on the polished wood and caging me in his shadow. "You're late for dinner, Seo," he murmured, his gaze tracing the sharp line of my blazer. I leaned back in my chair, unfazed. "I have a multinational company to run, Chairman Choi," I teased. "Some of us don't have time to lounge around all day." His hand slid from the desk to my jaw, thumb brushing my lower lip with a familiar, possessive ease. The spark in his eyes hadn't dulled in the last year. If anything, it had deepened now that the world knew I was his. "I didn't buy those shares and burn the Park family to the ground," he growled lightly. "Just so my husband could work 14-hour days." With one smooth motion, he closed my laptop. Then, without warning, he lifted me straight out of my executive chair and sat down in it himself, settling me firmly onto his lap. "Jin-Ho," I hissed, even as I relaxed against him. "The walls are glass. They're tinted," he reminded me calmly, nuzzling into the scent gland at my neck, his alpha pheromones wrapped around me, warm and grounding. "And even if they weren't, let them look. Let them see who really runs this empire." I laughed, melting into his chest. "You're still as obsessed as the day you opened that office door, aren't you?" He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. Taking my hand, he pressed a kiss to the simple gold band that had long replaced the black diamond. "Not obsessed," he corrected softly. "Devoted." His voice lowered, sincere and unguarded. "You aren't my partner because you're convenient, Yoon-jae. You are my partner because I love you. You're my partner because without you, I'm just a man with a lot of useless money." He stood, still holding me securely, and headed for the private elevator. "Come on," he said. "We have a reservation, and I have a very essential gift waiting for you at home." I smiled, looping my arms around his neck. "Another company?" He leaned closer, his eyes dark with promise. "Better," he whispered. "Me. All night." The elevator doors slid closed, sealing us away from the city lights and the world beyond. What we'd built wasn't convenient. It was powerful. It was earned. And it was ours.